We're going to talk this afternoon about some things that are working. What's working in organizations today? We've had a lot of questions posed. And so we have some terrific speakers who are going to share fascinating stories and perspectives on what's working. And it'll be lightning round style, although now having seen Sean this morning, I think we have a new bar for what a lightning round talk looks like. So good luck, you guys. You got it. We're going to click through some really interesting stories. But before I hand this over to our panelists, I want to share with you a few thoughts about what's working as we think about how to make Google the best place to learn on the planet. And we had the opportunity in people development, working with Prasad and the analytics team, to study how Googlers learn. And you know by now we study pretty much everything, and that helps shape our work. And we learned 4 things that have really formed the principles or the core beliefs that shape the design and delivery of our learning resources. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of those 4. The first is that learning is a process. It's not an event. It involves some motivation, often some pre-work. It involves practice, 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 and feedback. And Prasad mentioned earlier that we'd put 25,000 people through the unconscious bias session that Brian created with a team of people committed to making the unconscious conscious. And getting 25,000 people through a session was pretty cool, huge accomplishment. But the session is just the event. And on the front end of that, taking the self-assessment, and so many of us having the awful realization that we're more biased than we thought. And after the session, looking at our processes and thinking about how we take what we learned there and build it into the decision-making processes that we have around people here. And continuing the conversation. I can't tell you the number of people coming out of that session who said, "What's next? So how do I put this into practice?" So we know that learning happens as a process, and our job is to think end-to-end about where the motivation gets created, how we create the opportunities to practice, and what the feedback loop is, so that we really can get to behavior change. The second is that learning happens in real life. Googlers tell us they learn every day on their jobs, and that's certainly true for me. It can be humbling, but certainly true. And one of the ways that we think about real life is thinking about when people are at transition points or challenge points. And again, listening to Adam this morning, perhaps we want to find the defensive pessimists who have some big goal that they're responsible for, a talk they're about to give. But we look for people who've changed jobs or changed projects or just been promoted. Catch people at that point, the fresh start points that Katie mentioned, where you might actually have people a bit more open to learning, and then offer them exactly the right resources. Bill just mentioned another example of learning in real life, which is we actually start, as Iveta said, with her team, many meetings with very short meditations. And we've built them into our video conferencing system, so you can literally press pause and have a very short meditation, guided meditation that gets everyone in the room. And I like to say, let's get our minds and our bodies in the same place. And that helps us accomplish that. So real life is critical. The third of the 4 is that learning is personal. My learning style is different than Bill's, different than Brian's, and part of our role is helping people understand what their own learning style is, so that then as people, we can create the kind of experiences that will help us accelerate. We can find the right level of challenge that gets us motivated rather than scared. And then when you think about personal, that also means knowing that what I need to learn is different than what Catherine needs to learn. And so Prasad and Laszlo both mentioned our manager feedback survey, where our managers receive upward feedback. And one of the things we do when we share those results is we say, "Hi, Karen, here is your report. By the way, there are some learning resources we'd like to recommend to you. Now, they happen to be tied to my bottom scoring items." And that's great, because I'm more motivated right then, right when I get my results, to follow those links to those resources and learn about those things right then. So it's personal. It's not one size fits all. And last, we know that learning is social. Googlers tell us when they really need to figure something out, they ask each other. They turn to their colleagues for information and for advice and for support. We have a very extensive peer-to-peer learning network we call the G2G network. And in fact, last year, that network delivered far more learning programs and support than our own people ops team did, because that's where the learning is really happening. So we use those principles to help shape the learning design and delivery, and that's part for us of how we try to create the environment in which Googlers can be their best personal and professional selves to do really great things for Google and for the world. So that's a bit about what's working for us in my development lens in the learning space. I'm very, very excited and honored to be joined by some colleagues who are going to tell you a bit about what's working in their worlds. Brian's going to talk a little bit about innovation. Joanne will talk a bit about behavior change. It's going to be very, very interesting. I had a preview of all of these. Adam's going to share some thoughts on decision making, followed by Jennifer talking about workspace design. We're then going to hear from Brandon on getting a seat at the table. And we'll close out with Tom talking about leadership. So I'm so honored to be with these folks. And at this point, I'll hand over to Brian.